First guest today, the two-term Democrat from the 5th District, Congressman Chris Murphy. Congressman, good to see you back here again.
Thanks for having me.
And, of course, I have to ask you that question. John Droney created quite a controversy last week when he said that President Obama, if he came here with Nancy Pelosi, could actually hurt candidates. Do you agree with him at all?
No, I don't agree with that. Listen, the president was dealt an awful hand when he was sworn in. The January of 2009, this country was hemorrhaging jobs on the brink of an absolute economic collapse. He was handed two wars that for almost a decade had been mismanaged and overspent. And I think that given the circumstances that he inherited, the president's done a pretty good job with it. Now, are things as good as they need to be here in Connecticut or around the nation? No, we still have a lot of work to go. But, you know, Dennis, I'm not one of these guys that sort of sticks my finger up in the air and, you know, chooses my friends based on who's, you know, politically popular and who's not. If the president's coming here, you know, he's the president of the United States. I think he's done a good job under difficult circumstances, and I'll be proud to stand with him.
I interviewed you when you were running for Congress against Nancy Johnson, and you were very proud when House Speaker Nancy Pelosi came here to campaign for you. Now she's a little bit more polarizing than she was back in 2006. Do you think she could help you if she came here to campaign, or would people be turned off by that?
Well, you know, I haven't asked, you know, her, President Obama, or any other leading Democrats to come here to campaign, in large part because, you know, I know the people of the 5th District, you know, they don't get real impressed by folks coming in from the outside. In 2006, it was important to show people that our candidacy was serious, in large part because a lot of people gave me no shot running against Nancy Johnson. But as a means of informing voters about their choices, you know, they don't want to hear from leading Democrats or leading Republicans. They want to hear from me. And that's why what I'm doing is what I've always done. I'm spending every single day going out there, knocking on doors, picking a different neighborhood every afternoon or every evening, talking to people about what I've been doing, and then using it, as I always have, as a real sounding board to understand what people want from Washington, what they've been frustrated about. And it's that kind of personal one-on-one contact that has been how I've run this office for the 4 years that I've had it. And in the end, I think is the smartest and best campaign strategy if you're running for re-election.
Your opponent, State Senator Sam Caligiuri, has been telling your constituents, he's been asking them rather, are you better off now than you were 2 years ago? Are they better off?
Than they were listen, this economy is getting better, right? But it's a very slow march to recovery. I think you just look at the jobs numbers. As I mentioned, when this session began, we really were on the brink of falling into a depression-like situation in which we may have been staring at 20% unemployment. Every month since this president has been sworn in, we lost less and less jobs and are now slowly gaining jobs in this economy. Do we have a lot more to do? Absolutely. But the question, I think, and the choice for voters this November is, do you want to continue along this road of progress, or do you want to go back to the same policies that got us in this mess? And my frustration with Sam Caligiuri, or really any of the Republicans that I've heard talking here in this state or around the region, is that I haven't heard any economic policies from them that differ from the Bush policies that got us into this mess to begin with. And so I'm focusing on issues like protecting and growing Connecticut manufacturers, looking at long-term strategies for this economy, like investing in renewable energy technology and really supporting the great strength of our economy, which is education. And it's that sort of path and march forward that I think most voters want to continue on, rather than going back to the circumstances and the policies that got us in this mess.
You mentioned jobs, and according to the State Labor Department, the highest unemployment rate in the state is in your district, in Waterbury. It's now 12.2%, well above the national. And the state average, it's actually up from last year. In fact, unemployment has gone up in Torrington and Danbury in the past year and this year alone. How do you persuade people that it is getting better? Because they're not seeing it. More people are losing their jobs.
Sure. Waterbury for a very long time has had the highest unemployment in the state. Waterbury, obviously, for its history, has relied on manufacturing industrial jobs, and those have been the quickest to flee. This is obviously the city that both I represent and Senator Caligiuri represents. So to the extent that people are dissatisfied, as they should, with the state of the economy in Waterbury, I think they are going to present questions to both me and to Sam Caligiuri. I'm focusing in on that issue of manufacturing. I don't think Waterbury can come back economically without its manufacturing base. And so it's why, Dennis, I'm really leading the effort in the House of Representatives to renew the federal government's commitment to buying here in America, and for us to stop signing these trade deals that end up expeditiously offshoring jobs to Mexico, China, and to into Asia. That's the work that I've been doing, and it's the kind of work that I think the folks that I represent in Waterbury are really clamoring for. They don't want just any jobs. They want good-paying, middle-class jobs. Many of those are in the manufacturing sector, and it's something that I'm pretty proud of. And it's something that, you know, I don't come up with on my own. I learned that from going out and talking to people at their doors in Waterbury and visiting the factories of that city.
You talk about, you know, buying American, yet the state is spending money that often comes from the federal government on cars that are made in Japan. Do you think they should be doing that?
You know, we have had a really backwards policy at the federal level. We have allowed more and more of our own taxpayer dollars to be shipped overseas. Now, 70% of the federal purchasing comes through the defense budget, but that's Connecticut's economy. Connecticut's economy is reliant on defense manufacturing, and these big multinational defense companies, frankly, some of them located right here in this state, have pressed the federal government for changes in our historic Buy America law so that they can ship more and more of that work overseas. We've seen it right here in Connecticut as Pratt & Whitney continues to downsize its footprint in the state and continues to move more jobs overseas. You know, Dennis, I'm not a protectionist. I don't think we should just erect trade barriers around the state and in this country. But when it comes to our taxpayer dollars that are being sent to Washington, we should have a clear understanding that those dollars get spent here on U.S. jobs. And it's really, right now, my priority to make sure that in the short term and long term, when we send our taxpayer dollars to Washington, we spend them here. And it's something that Republicans and Democrats should and can get behind. There's nothing partisan about investing U.S. dollars in U.S. jobs.
Let's talk about the stimulus bill, which of course you voted for. And as you know, a lot of people say that it's been wasteful, that it really hasn't created the jobs that were promised. For instance, part of the study, you know, part of the money went to $2 million to study ants, money to study the effect of cocaine on monkeys. And here in Connecticut, $43 million went to Mohegan Sun. This is an organization that makes a lot of money. A lot of people are like, why did they get $43 million? And yet you voted for that. Why?
Well, first of all, let's be clear. There are no earmarks in the bill, so the money in the stimulus bill either gets distributed to states who decide where it goes or gets distributed to agencies. The money for Mohegan Sun was a loan to help them do construction, which hires people in the construction field. We have 23% unemployment. I want to create jobs, and if those jobs get created through entities like the Mohegan Sun, they're still jobs. That money is going to be paid back to the federal government. You know, listen, the stimulus bill in a lot of ways stopped us from lurching into a just almost unfathomable depression. Now, that's not a great campaign slogan, right? It could have been worse. I understand that. But, you know, you talk to the teachers and firefighters in New Britain, Connecticut, who still have their jobs because of the stimulus bill. You talk about the 100 construction workers who built the new community health center in New Britain, paid for by the stimulus bill, or the workers that are being hired by a solar company in Bethel because of a grant through the stimulus bill. They'll tell you that they're employed today because of that legislation. It's a piece of, I think, an overall economic strategy, but I really think we would be in a much worse place if not for the stimulus bill, and we would have much higher unemployment in this state if not for that legislation. Doesn't do everything we needed to do, and I will certainly grant you that there has been some frustrations with how the state has spent some of that money. It's been slow getting out there from the state government, and in some places it has not been spent by the state government to create jobs here in this state. But that's a fight that we need to have in Hartford.
If the Speaker came to you and said we need another stimulus bill, would you support it?
You know, I'm willing to support targeted investments, for instance, in education. We passed and the President signed just a few weeks ago a $10 billion emergency education funding bill. In New Britain, Connecticut, we were about to go to elementary school class sizes of 40 kids a class. That's a disaster, not only for the teachers who would lose their jobs, but for the students that would lose a whole year of education. It's those targeted investments that I think we continue to look at. We don't need to do a second stimulus bill of anywhere near the size of the one we passed at the beginning of last year.
We're going to take a quick break. More with Congressman Murphy in just a moment. If you'd like to comment on today's program, you can do so on my blog, The Hartfordite. That's on our website, WFSB.com. We're also on Twitter and on Facebook. We'll be right back. We're back here with Congressman Chris Murphy, and CNN this week said that your seat was vulnerable. Do you feel vulnerable?
Well, listen, as you know, this seat was designed to make anybody who has it vulnerable, right? It was conceived in 2000 as a seat where Nancy Johnson and Jim Maloney would be combined together. I love it because it's a district where you have equal numbers of Republicans and Democrats, conservatives, liberals. It demands an independent thinker, which I hope that I've been. I think I've been. But it certainly means that every 2 years you got to go out and prove your worth to the electorate. That was the case 2 years ago. That's the case again this year. I think that's one of the benefits of this district. I'd frankly rather see more districts like this. There are far too many Republicans and Democrats in Washington that are too safe, that really only have to play to their left-wing base or their right-wing base. And
we do have a few of those.
Yeah, right. And I think in this case, this district allows me to be an independent voice because that's what they demand.
What is your biggest accomplishment?
Well, I think for me, as an advocate of better health care for people of this country, I'm proud of the health care bill. I'm proud of the fact that we're going to end the discrimination against people who are sick and children who have pre-existing conditions. Is it a perfect bill? Absolutely not. But are there really important steps forward for people who don't have health care and for people who have gone without it simply because they had the misfortune of a devastating illness? Locally, I'd say my biggest accomplishment, the thing that I'm proudest of, is a project in Waterbury. We have the old Chase Brass factory really crumbling at the seams, a symbol of the old economy. And what people in Waterbury told me as I went door to door and held town hall meetings and supermarket office hours was that we needed to start revitalizing some of these old properties. And so we were able to win $15 million in federal money to rehab that building and turn it into new manufacturing space. That's something I'm very proud of as well.
On the converse, what's your biggest mistake? If you had a do-over, what would it be?
That's a good question. I will say that coming to Washington, I think I had an expectation that we were going to have an easier time getting cooperation amongst Republicans and Democrats. And I think that for my first 2 years, I sat and complained a lot to myself about the fact that it was very hard to reach out and cooperate with the other side. I've started to do something about it in my second term, but in that first term, I think that I wish that I had realized earlier on that Washington wasn't going to start communicating between Republicans and Democrats on its own, that you needed to start making systematic change. And so what I've done in my second term is I've helped restart a group called the Center Aisle Caucus, which is a group of moderate Republicans and Democrats that get together to try to talk on a regular basis and try to restart friendships. But if I have one regret, I guess it's about not getting started on some of that work earlier in the time that I've been in Washington.
You say moderate, but according to your voting record, a lot of people would say you're very liberal.
I think I fall sort of in the middle to center of the Democratic caucus. I'm proud that I was one of only a handful of Democrats recently to vote against the annual federal budget. I'm a supporter of the stimulus bill. I think that it was important to make some short-term investments in the economy, but the people in my district think that now is the time to start trimming the size of the federal budget. And so I'm proud that I've taken a much harder line than most in my caucus on the issue of annual spending. So I think that that's what my district demands, and that's what I've really pursued with respect to budgeting.
As we look at your voting record, I mean, there are folks who will say that you tend to be fairly liberal, and in terms of being fiscally conservative, there are groups that say that you score fairly low. Are we getting a new Chris Murphy this fall on the campaign trail, or is it the same Chris Murphy that was elected twice before?
No, I don't think it's new at all. I think that this district has really always demanded a degree of independence, and I think most economists will tell you that while we were on the verge of economic collapse, we did need an infusion of government funding. I don't really see that as liberal or conservative. I've always, I think, been a very sort of pragmatic thinker in terms of my approach to politics. I think a lot of people want to categorize you as liberal, conservative, conservative, a pragmatist, an ideologue. To me, why I go to door, why I spend so much time talking to the people in my district on their front doorsteps is my entire goal is to represent their interests. And I don't really care if in the end that puts me on one end of the spectrum or the other end of the spectrum. I just want to make sure I'm doing what they want me to do in Washington.
Congressman Chris Murphy, two-term Democrat, best of luck in November, and I'm sure we'll see you on this program debating Sam Caligiuri as you have in years past with your other opponents.